All right, vibe coding. Most respondents are not vibe coding, 72%, and an additional 5% are emphatic, it not being part of their development workflow. With this Stack Overflow survey, a good portion of the people that responded to it are professional developers. My guess is that when you are in a professional development space, often a corporate environment, the tools for the software that you use are already pre-existing, because many times you're not doing software from scratch. Many times you're just maintaining software. So the pipelines as well for software release and QA are predefined. And if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? So for established software, I could definitely see why vibe coding tools are not that valuable. If you are on the other part of the development lifecycle where you don't have an MVP or you have a loosely defined concept of what it is that you want to build, I think that is the area in which vibe coding can shine. AI and humans in the future. In a future with advanced AI, the number one reason developers would still ask a person for help is when I don't trust AI's answers. This positions human developers as the ultimate arbiters of quality and correctness. A lot of that has to do with the lack of reliability in the AI tools. As you'll see a little bit later, the tools generally get it right, but they're not quite at that point of finality where we are able as humans to full-heartedly trust them. That's why we still defer to the experience of a more advanced engineer to ultimately give us that security in our solutions, or ultimately get us unstuck of a very, very hard and nuanced problem that requires a lot of context beyond what a model can handle. AI tool frustrations. The biggest single frustration cited by 66% of developers is dealing with AI solutions that are almost right, but not quite, which often leads to the second biggest frustration. Debugging AI generated code is more time consuming. The solutions get, as I mentioned, kind of there. They're mostly there, but they're not quite there yet. And the thing with this is that you might save a lot of time on the code generation, on the initial code generation, but the longer that you go without looking at what's going on underneath the hood, the more the complexity grows and the more difficult it will be to solve for a bug that presents itself when the complexity is high. The time that you save in generating the initial code is the time that you end up spending on solving when the bug arrives. AI workflow and tool satisfaction. Respondents who said they are currently using mostly AI tools to complete tasks in the development workflow are highly satisfied with and frequently using AI to search for answers or learn new concepts. Respondents plan to mostly use AI in the future for documentation and testing tasks and are slightly less satisfied with the tools they are using now. This is accurate insofar as my experience with AI, the most valuable use case of it for me is that it speeds up the time that I'm spending exploring the internet, trying to find a solution to the particular problem that I have. The old workflow is, ironically, you go through Stack Overflow, you click through different tabs, you go through different links on Google to get some insight on the problem that you're trying to solve. Now, because of the convenience of AI, all you have to do is to navigate to the chat window in your IDE or just in a single tab on your browser and ask the questions to the model. Often, the model will present you with a decent enough answer that you can run with. Now, I do still think that some problems become so complex that you do end up having to read documentation, but the part of my typical workflow where I would scan through the links, go through Google, all that stuff, that has been extremely reduced. AI in development workflow. Developers show the most resistance to using AI for high responsibility, systemic tasks like deployment and monitoring. 66% don't plan to, and project planning, 69% don't plan to. Again, I think the reason why this is the case is because of the lack of reliability of those AI tools, especially the closer you get to production. And a lot of it also comes down to accountability. If you're a high enough engineer in ranking, the deployment, stuff like that, those things are going to be your responsibility. And to hand over oversight to a tool that you can't trust is a very difficult thing. Just like it would be difficult to hand over oversight to, for example, a deployment process to a new engineer on the team. It's kind of the same thing. The added baggage here is I think AI right now does have this connotation associated with it, or at least this perception of it. And in a lot of ways, a perception that is valid, that it is unreliable and unpredictable due to the probabilistic nature of its outputs. Educational attainment: 30% of developers learning to code this year have already attained a bachelor's degree, indicating they are learning for a higher degree, for working or upskilling. And this is huge speculation, so I could be completely wrong. But what I'm thinking here is that the younger generation sees that the job market sucks. And because of that, they look at going into university kind of like a defensive trench, right? Where at least if they go to university, yeah, they may take on a bunch of debt, and yeah, they may not learn any skills, but at least they're not having to face the reality of the job market for the next 4 years. And maybe by the time that 4 years is over, the market will be completely renewed and the demand for engineers will skyrocket again, something like that. That would be the only way that I could justify it, because logically, I think right now the narrative, especially online, is really that you're not going to get the value that is advertised from a traditional degree. And it had been known even prior to 2020 that getting a bachelor's degree in computer science doesn't necessarily prepare you to be a software engineer. And there are stories that I have heard of people who do get computer science degrees who ultimately end up still having to teach themselves how to program while getting their degree. So they're taking the school curriculum and they themselves have to still be working on stuff which all other engineers have to, which is having a really good portfolio, having a really good GitHub, so on and so forth. Learn to code for AI. Over 36% of respondents learn how to use AI-enabled tools for their job or advance their career in the last year. I think regardless of the efficacy of these AI tools that are being implemented in corporate or in the market as a whole, there has been a push in the last few years to get these tools integrated and to get them and to get employees to use them or to build an app that has AI in it. So naturally, that's going to create a demand for developers who are competent with the use of AI. I had a student that was recently interviewed not too long ago. And in that interview, from what I understood, there was a decent amount of questions that were revolved around AI. Have you built anything with AI? How do you use AI? What are some of your favorite AI tools? Stuff like that. So I wanted to look at work as well. So employment status, it's difficult to say whether one is connected to another, but developers who fill out the developer survey are 70% likely to be employed. Of the top reporting countries in the years, the US has the highest number of developers working remotely, 45%. And that's good. I mean, software engineering, software development has always been a remote friendly role. I mean, even before 2020, my mentor, shout out Tech Chief, was working on a hybrid schedule, if I'm not mistaken. So if you want to look for remote work, you could still do it in the software development space. The issue is the competition for those roles is very high, but they are out there. Salary by developer type: senior executives, 139K, engineering managers, 130K, and financial analysts, 104K, have the highest median annual salaries globally. Insofar as what I'm seeing, I think this is generally good. So engineering manager, 130. Let's see. Architect, software or solutions, 102. I think that this makes generally sense. So let's see. Yeah, developer, full stack, 72. And then developer embedded applications, 81, 79. Yeah, I would say generally this does make sense to me insofar as what you end up making. A big part of it is that if you look at up here, it says that the company size is many of the developers work in companies that are less than 500 employees, which means the companies are small, you know? And if you have a financial responsible company that is not super huge, not a mega huge company, then they're not going to be able to pay their developers what some of these Silicon Valley companies are able to, right? And that's pretty sensible depending on where you live. 79, 80K, 90K. If you're just starting out, it's pretty decent. It just really depends on your cost of living. But if it's your first job out the gate, a lot of you guys would be super happy to have those particular roles. And I actually like these numbers a little bit more because it's more realistic to what you end up getting for your first role either way. There was an era in YouTube where people would really highlight, it's like, oh, you can get 6 figures for your first job. And I think that might make for good clickbait. But in reality, it's like most guys will end up being employed for a small company that doesn't really have the funds to pay them the 6 figures right off the bat. And I think this is more of a realistic trajectory. It's like for your first few years, maybe you're earning 70 to 80,000. Maybe even on your entry, you're even at like 65. And then once you graduate at that level and you upskill and you learn more sophisticated stuff like system design and whatnot, then you can start going for your 90, 100K, stuff like that. And I think that this is probably some of the most accurate numbers that I've seen. But if you are curious about salary and all that stuff, the way that I would look for it is look at your specific region and see how much the role that you're looking for is making in that area. And if you are interested in breaking into the industry, it's been a very tough few years. The opportunities are still out there, but it is going to require a lot of sweat equity, a lot of dedication, and a willingness to go beyond your comfort zone in order to land the next job or even your first job. And if that is something that you want to do and you need help getting a strategy put together that will take you there, please make sure to book a consultation with me. My link is in the description. If you want some guidance on how to get hired even in today's market and you don't have the funds or you want to learn for free, I recommend that you watch this video right here. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next time. Peace.